Admiral Keshva stood on the bridge of the Eternal Triumph, watching the stars shift as his fleet moved through the void. He had done this 40 times before. 40 times he had led the Concordat's diplomatic fleets into new territories. 40 times he had brought new worlds into the fold. This would be 41, the bridge hummed with quiet efficiency. Officers moved between stations, their scaled hands dancing across holographic displays. The Genitar were an old race, proud and measured. They had built an empire that stretched across 47 star systems over 10,000 years. They knew how civilization worked. They knew the rules. "Admiral, we are approaching the boundary markers," his navigation officer reported. Her voice was calm, professional. Keshva nodded. Ahead of them, floating in the darkness of space, were simple beacons. They broadcast a basic message in several languages. United Earthspace authorized vessels only. It was crude. Simple, the mark of a young species. "Take us through," Keshva ordered. "Broadcast our standard diplomatic package." The communications officer activated the transmission. It was a message the Concordat had perfected over millennia. It declared their presence. It announced their superiority. It invited negotiation from a position of strength. Some species called it arrogant. Keshva called it efficient. Why waste time pretending equality when it did not exist? The fleet crossed the boundary. 23 massive ships, each one a city unto itself. They moved in perfect formation, a demonstration of power and coordination. Behind them, the beacons continued their simple broadcast. Unconcerned, Keshva settled into his command chair. Now came the waiting. This was always the same. The native species would detect them. There would be panic, confusion, hasty conferences. Then would come the first warning. It was always theatrical, always emotional. The young species would demand they leave, threaten consequences, pound their equivalent of fists on their equivalent of tables, and then the real negotiation would begin. His communication officer's crest suddenly flared, the Genitar equivalent of surprise. "Admiral, we have a response." It came very quickly. "On screen," Keshva said. Fast responses usually meant either very good sensor networks or very aggressive temperaments. Either way, it was useful information. The screen flickered. A human appeared. Keshva had reviewed the files. They had gathered on this species, bipedal, mammalian, from a world they called Earth. They had only achieved faster than light travel 200 years ago. Infants by galactic standards, the human wore a military uniform, dark blue with silver insignia. His face was smooth and brown, his hair cut short and neat. His eyes were hard. He did not look panicked. He looked calm. That was unusual, but not unprecedented. "Unidentified vessels," the human said. His voice was level, without inflection. "You have entered United Earthspace without authorization. Leave immediately. You will not receive another warning." The transmission ended. Keshva's officers looked at him. He could see the confusion in their body language. One of his tactical officers spoke up. "Admiral, that was very abrupt." "Indeed," Keshva said. He felt a small flutter of amusement. Very abrupt. No preamble. No demands for explanation. No lengthy threats. He tapped his claws on the armrest of his chair. "They are attempting to project strength. Admirable for such a young species." His diplomatic advisor, an old Genitar named Velsha, approached. "Admiral, should we respond with our second stage message?" "Not yet," Keshva said. "We proceed according to standard protocol. They have given their first warning. We acknowledge it by our actions, not our words. We continue forward. They will issue second and third warnings. Each will be more specific, more threatening. By the fifth or sixth warning, we will begin formal negotiation." Velsha nodded. "As it has always been." "As it has always been," Keshva agreed. The fleet moved deeper into human space. The bridge settled back into routine operations. Keshva pulled up the intelligence files on humanity again. It was always wise to review what was known before negotiations began. Humans had emerged from a world they called Earth. It was a death world by most standards. High gravity, aggressive predators, extreme weather patterns. Humanity had clawed its way to the top of their food chain through persistence and adaptability. They were omnivores, which explained much. Species that had to both hunt and gather tended to be flexible in their thinking. They had a violent history. HFY scrolled through the files. Wars, so many wars. They had nearly destroyed themselves several times with nuclear weapons. That was concerning but not unique. Many species went through such phases. The fact that humans had survived it spoke to some wisdom beneath their aggression. Their technology was impressive for their age. Not anywhere near Concordat standards, of course, but respectable. Their ships were fast. Their weapons were crude but effective. They had colonized 14 systems in 2 centuries. That showed ambition. HFY paused at one section of the file. Human communication patterns. He read through the analysis prepared by Concordat anthropologists. Humans were remarkably direct in their speech. They valued brevity. They said what they meant and expected others to do the same. Interesting, but not particularly relevant. When faced with a superior power, all species became more elaborate in their communication. They had to. The dance of diplomacy required it. "Admiral," his sensor officer called. "We are detecting increased activity in this system. Multiple ship movements. They appear to be civilian vessels altering course away from our trajectory. Evacuation patterns?" HFY asked. "Possibly. Or simply cautious avoidance." HFY nodded. That was normal. Civilians getting out of the way while their military postured. Sensible. 3 hours passed. The fleet encountered no resistance. No follow-up warnings. The space ahead of them was quiet. "Admiral," Valsha said quietly, "they have not issued a second warning." "They are making us wait," HFY replied. "Building tension. They want us to feel uncertain. It is a psychological tactic. Crude, but it can be effective against less experienced negotiators." He smiled, showing his teeth. "We will wait them out. 6 hours. Then 12. Still nothing. HFY began to feel the first small tug of uncertainty. This was unusual. Most species issued their second warning within 6 hours. The humans had gone silent. "Open a channel to Concordat High Command," he ordered. "Request updated intelligence on human diplomatic protocols." While he waited for the response, he reviewed the first message again. The human's face calm and hard. The words simple and clear. "You will not receive another warning." Of course not, HFY thought. "Not yet, but you will send one." "They always do." A response came back from High Command. Concordat anthropologists had reviewed all available human diplomatic communications. Their analysis was clear. Humans followed standard escalation protocols. They gave warnings. They negotiated. They compromised. Like all civilized species, HFY relaxed. His instincts had been correct. The humans were simply making them wait longer than usual. Perhaps it was taking them time to organize a coherent response. Young species often struggled with unified command structures. "Admiral," his navigation officer said, "we are approaching a human colony world. Designation Kepler 442b, population approximately 50,000. Mining and research outpost." "Excellent," HFY said. "Take us into orbit. Prepare landing parties. We will begin standard occupation procedures." The fleet moved into position around the planet. It was a cold world, barely habitable. The human settlement was a cluster of domes near the equator. HFY could see ships lifting off from the surface, dozens of them. Transports carrying people away. "They are evacuating," his tactical officer observed. "Of course they are," HFY said. "They know they cannot resist. They are being sensible. This is progress." Landing craft descended to the surface. HFY watched the feeds as his troops secured the perimeter of the settlement. No resistance. The humans had left everything behind. Buildings, equipment, supplies, all of it intact. Velsha approached again. Admiral, this is going remarkably smoothly. Yes, Keshva agreed. But something nagged at him. That message. That single brief message. You will not receive another warning. He pushed the thought aside. 40 times he had done this. 40 times it had followed the same pattern. The humans would issue their second warning soon, probably demanding they leave the colony world. Then the third, threatening military action. Then the fourth, actually mobilizing their forces, and then they would talk. That was how it always worked. That was how civilization worked. The settlement on Kepler 442b was empty. Keshva walked through the main dome, his boots echoing on the metal floor. His troops had secured every building, every tunnel, every storage facility. Not a single human remained. They left in a hurry, Commander Thelkor reported, walking beside him. Food still on tables, equipment still running. They took only essentials and left everything else. Keshva examined a workspace. Computers still glowed with active displays. A half-finished cup of some human beverage sat beside a keyboard. It was still warm. How long ago? No more than 2 hours before we arrived. They were very efficient. That word again, efficient. The human message had been efficient too. No wasted words. No elaborate protocol. Just a simple statement. Keshva pushed the thought away. Establish our command center in the main administrative building. Begin full survey of the colony's resources. Send status report to High Command. Inform them we have achieved first occupation with 0 casualties. Yes, Admiral. Thelkor paused. Still no word from the humans? No, but it has only been 20 hours since we crossed their border. They are likely still organizing their response. Keshva looked around the empty dome. Or perhaps this was their response. Withdrawal without conflict. That would be wise of them. But it did not feel wise. It felt wrong. Keshva had learned to trust his instincts over 40 successful campaigns. Something about this situation was different, back aboard the Eternal Triumph. Velsha had assembled a team of anthropologists. They had spent the day analyzing human cultural data, trying to predict the next move. Keshva joined them in the conference room. What have you learned? He asked. The lead anthropologist, a young Genitar named Kivra, activated a holographic display. We have reviewed extensive human historical records, their patterns of conflict and diplomacy. And? They are complicated, Kivra admitted. Humans have fought thousands of wars among themselves. Their history is remarkably violent. But they also have strong diplomatic traditions. Many of their conflicts ended with negotiation. So they understand the process, Keshva said. That is good, yes, but ... Kivra hesitated. There are troubling patterns as well? When humans issue ultimatums, they often act on them with surprising speed. Velsha leaned forward. Examples? Kivra pulled up several historical incidents. In their year 1941, a nation called Japan attacked another called the United States. The Americans had issued economic ultimatums. Japan ignored them. The Americans had not issued multiple warnings over months. They had stated their position clearly, and when Japan proceeded anyway, war was immediate. That was war between nations, Keshva said. This is first contact. Entirely different. Perhaps, Kivra said. But there are more examples. Human history is full of situations where they stated a position once and acted immediately when it was challenged. They have a saying, I will not tell you again. When they say this, they mean it literally. Keshva felt cold. Show me that message again. The first one they sent us. The human admiral appeared on the screen, calm, professional. You have entered United Earth space without authorization. Leave immediately. You will not receive another warning. You will not receive another warning, Keshva repeated slowly. Not, this is your first warning, not, we warn you for the first time. They said we would not receive another warning. It could be imprecise translation, Velsha suggested. Young species often struggle with proper diplomatic language. Or it could be precise, Kivra said quietly. Humans value precision in their language. What if they meant exactly what they said? What if that was not their first warning? What if it was their only warning? The room went silent. No, Velsha said finally. No civilized species operates that way. It would be barbaric. You must allow time for response, for consideration, for negotiation. That is how society functions across the galaxy. That is how we have functioned for 10,000 years. But humans are not from our galaxy, Tivra said. I mean, they are, but they developed independently. They did not learn from us. They created their own systems, their own protocols. What if their protocols are different? Keshva stood abruptly. This is speculation. We cannot base strategy on speculation. He looked at each of them. High Command has reviewed human diplomatic history. They confirmed humans follow standard patterns. We proceed as planned. But that night, Keshva could not rest. He returned to his private quarters and accessed the human cultural database again. He searched for patterns, for clues, for anything that would settle his growing unease. He found a human concept called last warning. Humans use this phrase frequently. This is your last warning. I am warning you for the last time. I will not warn you again. And when humans said these things, they acted. Immediately, without further preamble, he found records of human parents dealing with children. I am going to count to 3. 1, 2, 3. And at 3 there were consequences. No count to 4. No negotiation. The number was stated, the countdown proceeded, and the result was inevitable. He found military records. Commanders who drew lines and defended them absolutely. Do not cross this line. And when the line was crossed, response was instant. Humans, he realized, saw warnings differently. For the Genitar, for most galactic species, warnings were the beginning of a conversation. They were opening positions in a negotiation. You issued many warnings, each more serious, giving everyone time to adjust, to save face, to find compromise, but for humans, warnings were not conversation. They were the end of conversation. They were the moment when talking stopped and action began. He pulled up their original message one more time, watched the human admiral's face, listened to his tone. There was no anger there, no emotion at all. Just simple statement of fact. Leave immediately. You will not receive another warning. It was not a threat. It was information. It was telling them what would happen next. Keshva felt ice in his veins. No, he whispered to himself. No, I must be wrong. High Command confirmed the analysis. We have studied them. They follow patterns. But what if the anthropologists had looked at the wrong patterns? What if they had studied human-to-human diplomacy, where both sides understood the unspoken rules? What if they had missed the pattern of how humans dealt with outsiders, with threats, with violations of their stated boundaries? He reached for his communicator, then stopped. What would he say? That he had a feeling? That he was frightened by the efficiency of the human message? He would look foolish. 40 successful campaigns, and now he was panicking over silence? Besides, they were already here. They had already occupied Kepler 442b. If the humans were going to act, they would have done so already. 72 hours had passed since that first message. Surely, if they intended immediate action, it would have happened by now. Keshva forced himself to relax. He was overthinking this. The humans were probably arguing among themselves about how to respond. Young species often had fractured command structures. Some humans probably wanted war, others wanted negotiation. They were likely still debating. He would wait one more day. If there was still no response, he would send his own message. Open the formal negotiation himself. That would be reasonable. That would be civilized. In another part of space, far from Kepler 442b, Admiral Chen Rodriguez stood in Earth Defense Command. The room was silent except for the soft hum of computers. Hundreds of officers sat at stations, watching displays, coordinating movements, final fleet positions. Rodriguez asked, All fleets in position, Admiral, her tactical officer reported. Stealth systems holding. They have not detected our ships. Time since warning was issued? 71 hours, 42 minutes. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Weapons authorization? Received and confirmed, Admiral. All fleet commanders have verified their orders. She looked at the main display. It showed the Genitar fleet, sitting comfortably in orbit around Kepler 442b. Confident, secure, they had no idea what was about to happen. Why would they? They had ignored the warning. They had occupied a human world, and humanity had been silent. The Genitar probably thought silence meant weakness. They probably thought humanity was afraid or confused, or debating what to do. They did not understand that humanity had already said everything that needed to be said. 72 hours ago, they had been told to leave. They had been told they would not receive another warning. That was not the beginning of a conversation. That was the end of one. 72 hours, Rodriguez said quietly. We gave them 72 hours to comply. More than reasonable. Yes, Admiral, her tactical officer agreed. Very generous. Rodriguez looked at the countdown on her screen. 3 minutes until the 72-hour mark. 3 minutes until the deadline humanity had set. Even though the Genitar did not know a deadline existed, she had not wanted this. None of them had. But humanity had learned long ago that some lessons could only be taught one way. You said what you meant. You meant what you said. And when someone ignored your words, you showed them through action that your words had meaning. 1 minute, someone called out. Rodriguez took a deep breath. All fleets, this is Earth Defense Command. Authorization is confirmed. Execute on my mark. The seconds ticked down. Mark. The first HFY knew of the attack was when the Eternal Triumph's shields flared. Alarms shrieked across the bridge. Officers scrambled to their stations. Their calm shattered in an instant. Report. HFY barked, jumping to his feet. Multiple contacts. His sensor officer shouted, They are everywhere. How did they get so close? The main display filled with red markers. Human ships, dozens of them at attack range. They had appeared as if from nowhere, dropping stealth systems all at once. They surrounded the Genitar fleet completely. Where did they come from? Velsha gasped. They were already here, HFY realized with horror. They have been here the whole time, waiting. Incoming fire. The ship shuddered as human weapons hammered against the shields. HFY had studied human weapons systems. They were crude compared to Concordat technology. Kinetic projectiles and primitive energy weapons. They should not have been particularly dangerous, but these were not single shots. The humans were firing everything they had all at once. Thousands of projectiles. Hundreds of energy beams. The sheer volume was overwhelming. Shields at 60%. Tactical called out. 50%. Admiral, they are concentrating fire. All ships return fire. Target the nearest human vessels. HFY ordered. His mind raced. This was wrong. This was all wrong. Where were the demands? Where were the ultimatums? Where was the negotiation? The Genitar fleet began to respond, their superior weapons lancing out toward the human ships. Several human vessels took hits. Their shields collapsed. Their hulls breached. But they did not retreat. They did not even slow down. They kept coming, kept firing. 3 of our destroyers are reporting critical damage. His communications officer reported. The Steadfast Grace is gone. Direct hit to their reactor. Gone. One of their ships, simply gone in the first minute of battle. HFY felt his heart's hammering. Open a channel. All frequencies. Tell them we wish to negotiate. Channel open. Human forces, this is Admiral HFY of the Genitar Concordat. We are prepared to discuss terms. We acknowledge your another massive impact. The lights flickered. Shields at 30%. They are not responding, the communications officer said. They are not even acknowledging our hails. Velsha clutched his arm. Admiral, they are not following protocol. They are supposed to accept our surrender. But Keshva understood now, with terrible clarity. The humans were following protocol. Their protocol. They had given their warning. 72 hours ago, they had said everything they were going to say. Leave immediately. You will not receive another warning. This was not the beginning of combat. This was the promised consequence of ignoring that warning. Evasive maneuvers. Keshva shouted. All ships, scatter formation. Try to break through their lines. The Genitar fleet tried to respond, tried to fight back, but they had not been ready for battle. They had been ready for negotiation. Their ships were in close formation, designed to look impressive, not to fight. Their weapons were powered, but not fully charged. Their crews were not at battle stations. The humans, on the other hand, had been ready. Perfectly ready. Their ships moved with precision. Their fire was coordinated. They had planned this down to the second. 2 more destroyers gone. The morning star is venting atmosphere. Keshva watched his fleet die. Ships that had served the Concordat for centuries, burning and breaking in the void. Crews he had commanded for years, snuffed out in bursts of violent light. Admiral, the radiant future is requesting permission to surrender. Granted. All ships are authorized to surrender. Broadcast on all channels. But the humans did not stop. Ship after ship broadcast surrender signals. Some tried to power down weapons, the universal sign of capitulation. The humans kept firing. Why are they not stopping? Thelkor shouted. We are surrendering. Because they had surrendered 72 hours ago, Keshva thought numbly. When they had been told to leave, that had been the chance to surrender. That had been the moment to comply. Everything after that was just the consequence playing out. The bridge shook again. Harder this time. Sparks flew from control panels. The artificial gravity flickered. Shields gone. Tactical reported. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. Reactor containment falling. Keshva looked at the display. Of his 23 ships, only 7 were still combat capable. The rest were debris or dying. The humans had not lost a single vessel. Damaged, yes. But none destroyed. It had been 14 minutes. Abandoned ship, Keshva said quietly. Admiral? Velsha stared at him. Abandoned ship, Keshva shouted. All hands to escape pods, now. Alarms changed pitch as the evacuation order went out. Keshva watched his crew flee their stations, running for the pod bays. He should go too. He knew he should go too, but he stood there, watching the battle on the main display. Watching human ships move with cold efficiency from target to target. Watching his fleet, his career, his perfect record, all burning. Admiral, please? Velsha tugged at his arm. We must go. Keshva let himself be pulled toward the escape pods. As they ran through the corridors, the ship groaning and dying around them, he kept replaying that message in his mind. The human admiral's calm face. The simple words. Leave immediately. You will not receive another warning. Not, this is your first warning. Not, we will be forced to take action. Simply a statement of what would happen. Leave or face the consequences. No negotiation. No second chances. They had meant it. They had meant every word. The escape pod ejected with a violent lurch. Through the small viewport, Keshva watched the Eternal Triumph tear itself apart. A reactor breach, white and hot, consuming the ship that had been his home for 20 years. Other pods floated nearby. Survivors? Some of them would make it. The humans were not firing on the escape pods, at least. That was something. A small mercy, or maybe it was not mercy. Maybe it was practicality. The humans wanted survivors. Wanted someone to carry the message back. Wanted the Concordat to understand what had happened here. Admiral, Velsha said softly. What do we tell them? What do we tell High Command? Keshva stared out at the debris field that had been his fleet. We tell them the truth. We tell them that humans do not negotiate the way we do. We tell them that when humans give a warning, it is the only warning they will give. They will not believe us. No, HFY agreed. They will not. Not at first. Hours later, the escape pods were collected. Not by the humans. By a Concordat rescue ship that had been waiting at the border, monitoring from safe distance. They had watched the whole battle. They had recorded everything when HFY was brought aboard. Wrapped in a medical blanket, the rescue ship's captain approached him. Admiral HFY. We recorded ... High Command will need to review ... How long did it last? HFY asked. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, distant. The battle? 14 minutes from first shot to last. 14 minutes. 40 years of diplomatic success. 10,000 years of Concordat tradition. 14 minutes to destroy it all. Did they ... HFY paused. Did they ever respond to our surrender signals? No, Admiral. They maintained complete communication silence throughout the engagement. The only message they broadcast was at the end. What did they say? The captain looked uncomfortable. They repeated their original warning. Word for word. You have entered United Earth space without authorization. Leave immediately. You will not receive another warning. And then they left. Of course they did. Because they had already said everything they needed to say. 72 hours ago, they had told the Genitar fleet exactly what would happen. And then they had followed through. Precisely and completely, HFY thought about all the species the Concordat had encountered. All the careful negotiations. All the elaborate dances of diplomacy. Warnings and counter-warnings. Threats and counter-threats. A civilized process that allowed everyone to save face, to find compromise. Humans did not do that. Humans said what they meant once, and then they acted. It was efficient. Terribly, brutally efficient. Take us home, HFY said. High Command needs to know. The galaxy needs to know. Know what, Admiral? HFY looked at the young captain. Looked at his confidence, his certainty that the universe operated by known rules. Soon that certainty would be shattered, as HFY had been. That everything we thought we knew about first contact is wrong, HFY said. That there is a species out there who means exactly what they say, who will act without hesitation, without negotiation, without second chances. We need to warn everyone. But Admiral, no civilized species operates that way. HFY laughed. It was a bitter sound. That is what I thought too. What we all thought. We were wrong. The rescue ship turned away from human space, carrying its survivors and its terrible lesson. Behind them, human ships patrolled the border, silent and watchful. They had given their warning once. They would not give it again. They did not need to. The burning wreckage of the Genitar fleet carried the message. Clearly enough, humans said what they meant, and they meant what they said. The Concordat High Council chamber was ancient. Its walls had witnessed 10,000 years of decisions, debates, and declarations. But it had never witnessed anything like this. The holographic display showed the battle. Again and again the council members watched it. The sudden appearance of human ships, the devastating attack. The Genitar fleet, proud and powerful, reduced to debris in 14 minutes. And through it all, the humans remaining silent. Impossible, Council Member Reshtar said. He was old, even by Genitar standards. He had served on the council for 3 centuries. No civilized species acts this way. And yet they did, HFY replied. He stood in the center of the chamber, still bearing the marks of his ordeal. Burns on his scales. Exhaustion in his eyes. They gave us one warning. We ignored it. They acted. One warning is not sufficient. Another council member protested. There must be time for consideration, for response, for negotiation. That is how civilization functions. Velsha stepped forward. He had insisted on accompanying HFY to the council. We have reviewed human communication patterns extensively since the incident. We missed something crucial in our original analysis. He activated another display. It showed human diplomatic exchanges throughout their history. When humans negotiate with each other, they do follow patterns we recognize. Multiple exchanges. Careful escalation. But look at this. He highlighted several incidents. When humans deal with what they perceive as threats or violations, they behave differently. They state their position once. If it is ignored, they act. Examples? Reshtar demanded. Valsha pulled up historical records. Human year 1941. The United States issued economic demands to Japan. Not multiple demands over months. One clear statement. Japan proceeded anyway. The result was immediate war. That was between nation-states of the same species, someone objected. Human year 1962, Valsha continued. The Cuban Missile Crisis. The United States detected weapons in Cuba. They drew a line. They demanded removal. They did not issue multiple warnings. They stated their position and prepared for immediate nuclear war if it was not met. The crisis was resolved, but only because the other side understood the Americans meant exactly what they said. More examples followed. Human police giving warnings to criminals. Stop or I will shoot. Not 5 warnings? 1 warning. Human parents dealing with children. I am counting to 3. And at 3 there were consequences. Human military commanders drawing lines. Do not cross this line. And when lines were crossed, response was instant. They have a saying, Valsha said quietly. Actions speak louder than words. To humans, words are cheap, easy. They do not trust elaborate promises or lengthy negotiations. They trust demonstration. They trust action. When they give their word, they expect to be believed. And when others do not believe them, they prove their seriousness through action. The chamber was silent. This is barbaric, Reshtar finally said. This is the behavior of primitives. Shoot first, ask questions later? Perhaps, Keshva said. Or perhaps it is just different. We come from worlds where time was abundant, where careful negotiation was possible, where the cost of misunderstanding could be resolved through more talking. But humans come from a death world, a place where hesitation meant death, where clear, immediate communication was survival. They carried that culture into space. Are you defending them? Reshtar asked incredulously. They destroyed your fleet. I am explaining them, Keshva replied. There is a difference. They told us to leave. We did not leave. By their logic, everything that happened afterward was our responsibility. We were warned. We chose to ignore the warning. The consequences were stated clearly. We simply did not believe them, because no one would believe such a thing. Reshtar slammed his hand on the table. It is insane. It is efficient, Keshva said softly. Terrifyingly efficient. No wasted time. No wasted words. No lengthy negotiations that might fail. Just clear communication and immediate follow-through. From their perspective, we are the insane ones. Why issue multiple warnings? Why repeat yourself? Why give enemies time to prepare, time to find weaknesses, time to bring in reinforcements? Say it once. Mean it completely. Act if necessary. A junior council member spoke up. What about the other species? Has anyone checked if humans have had contact with others? Valsha nodded grimly. We sent inquiries across the galaxy to every species we have contact with. We asked if anyone had encountered humans. He pulled up a new display. The Narration Collective sent survey probes into human space last year. The humans sent one message telling them to retrieve the probes immediately. The Narration assumed they had time to complete their survey first. Standard protocol, by our understanding. 14 of their probes were destroyed. No warning. No negotiation. Just destruction. Another image appeared. The Tlack Merchant Guild attempted to establish a trading post on the edge of human space 6 months ago, without permission. The humans sent one message. Leave within 24 hours. The Tlack thought this was an opening negotiating position. They began composing a counteroffer. At the 24-hour mark, the trading post was destroyed. All hands lost. Why did we not know about these incidents? Someone demanded. Because they seemed like minor border disputes, Volsha explained. The Ryshan lost probes. Expensive but not catastrophic. The Tlak lost a trading post. Tragic, but they have hundreds. No one realized there was a pattern. No one understood what it meant. Keshva added, and both species blamed themselves. The Ryshan thought they had misunderstood the deadline. The Tlak thought they had committed some cultural offense. Neither realized the truth, that humans say what they mean once and expect to be believed. The council chamber erupted in discussion. Some members were angry, others were frightened. All were shaken. This was not how the galaxy worked. This was not how civilized species behaved. We must respond, Reshtar declared. We cannot let this stand. The Concordat has never backed down from anyone. We will assemble our war fleet. We will show these humans that we are not to be trifled with. No, Keshva said firmly. That is exactly what we must not do. You would have us surrender? Accept this defeat? I would have us survive, Keshva replied. High Council, I have studied these humans extensively since my return. I have reviewed everything we know about them, and I have reached a conclusion. He took a deep breath. Humans do not want war. They do not want to conquer. They want to be left alone. They mark their borders clearly. They defend those borders absolutely. But they have never attacked anyone outside their space. Never invaded. Never conquered. They are not the Concordat. They do not seek to expand. They seek only to protect what is theirs. So we do nothing? Reshtar asked. After they destroyed an entire diplomatic fleet? We acknowledge reality, Keshva said. We apologize. We pay reparations. And we tell every species in the galaxy what we learned. That humans mean what they say. That their warnings are not negotiations. That when they draw a line, that line is absolute. This is humiliation. This is survival, Keshva countered. High Council, I am a military officer. I understand pride. I understand the desire to respond to insult with force. But I also understand when we are outmatched. Not in technology, not in strength, but in will, in certainty, in the absolute commitment to act without hesitation. He gestured to the frozen image of the battle. Look at this. Really look at it. The humans did not attack in anger. They did not hesitate. They did not negotiate. They simply did exactly what they said they would do. This is not an enemy we can intimidate. This is not an enemy we can outlast. This is an enemy who will do exactly what they promise, every single time, without doubt or delay. The council was quiet again. Finally, Reshtar spoke. And if we had left when they told us to? Then none of this would have happened, Keshva said. That is the point. They do not want to fight. They want to be believed. If we had simply believed them, taken them at their word, none of my crew would be dead. A different council member, one who had been silent until now, spoke up. We should call an emergency session of the Galactic Assembly. This concerns everyone. Every species needs to understand what we have learned. Nods of agreement around the chamber, and what do we tell them? Reshtar asked. How do we explain this? Keshva looked at the hologram of the human admiral, the one who had given that first, final warning. His calm face, his level voice. We tell them the truth, that we encountered a species who communicates differently than we do, who values efficiency over elaboration, who says what they mean once and expects to be believed, and who will absolutely, without question, follow through on what they say. He paused. And we tell them that if they receive a warning from humanity, they should believe it, because they will not receive another one the council voted. The decision was unanimous, if reluctant. The Concordat would seek peace with humanity. They would acknowledge their mistake, and they would warn the galaxy within days. The message went out to every member of the Galactic Assembly. to every independent species. To every outpost and colony and ship that could receive a new species has entered galactic politics. They are called humans. They are dangerous not because they are aggressive, but because they are sincere. When they speak, they mean exactly what they say. When they warn only once. 6 months had passed since the incident. The Galactic Assembly had met 3 times to discuss the human situation. The debates were heated, lengthy, and ultimately pointless. The facts remained unchanged. Humans existed. They defended their space absolutely. And they did not negotiate the way everyone else did. HFY stood in the teaching hall of the Concordat Military Academy. Before him sat 200 young officers, the next generation of the Concordat's diplomatic fleet. They looked at him with a mixture of respect and pity. He was the admiral who had lost an entire fleet. The commander whose perfect record had been shattered. He did not mind. He had a more important role now. Today we discuss the human incident, he began. I know you have all studied the recordings. You have read the reports. You think you understand what happened? You do not. A young officer raised her hand. Admiral, the reports are clear. The humans attacked without proper warning. They violated every standard of civilized warfare. No, HFY said firmly. They warned us once, clearly. We simply did not believe them. That is the lesson you must understand. Not that humans are barbaric, but that we failed to listen. He pulled up the now famous message. The human admiral's face. The calm words. You have entered United Earth space without authorization. Leave immediately. You will not receive another warning. What does this message say? HFY asked the class. That we are not authorized to be there, someone answered. That we should leave, another added. This is their first warning, a third said. No. HFY interrupted. Listen to the exact words. Not, this is your first warning. It says you will not receive another warning. The warning is already given. In that sentence. That is the warning. There will be no other. That is what the words mean. The class was silent. This is not a cultural difference you can ignore, HFY continued. This is a fundamental change in how you must think. With every other species, a warning is the beginning of negotiation. With humans, a warning is the end of negotiation. The time for discussion is before the warning. Once the warning is given, the only choices are compliance or consequences. He advanced the display to show the battle. We did not comply. We assumed we had time. We assumed there would be more communication. We were wrong. The consequences followed exactly as they stated, immediate, overwhelming, final. A senior student spoke up. But Admiral, how can we conduct diplomacy with a species that refuses to negotiate? That allows no room for mistake? That punishes ignorance with death? HFY smiled slightly. An excellent question. And it reveals a misunderstanding. Humans do negotiate extensively, but they negotiate before the line is drawn. Once they state a final position, once they issue a warning, negotiation is over. The key is to engage with them before that point. He pulled up new data. Since the incident, the Concordat has established formal diplomatic relations with humanity. We approached carefully. We respected their borders. We asked permission before entering their space. And do you know what happened? The class waited. They were remarkably friendly, open, willing to discuss trade, cultural exchange, even military cooperation. They invited our ambassadors to their worlds. They shared technology. They negotiated fairly and honestly. He paused. Because we did not threaten them. We did not violate their space. We listened when they spoke. So they are not hostile? Someone asked. They are protective, HFY replied. There is a difference. They do not seek conflict, but they absolutely will not tolerate violation of their stated boundaries. Understand this, and you can work with them. Ignore this, and you will face what I faced. The lesson continued. HFY taught them the human concept of last warnings. He taught them about human directness. about their value of efficiency, about their deep belief that words should have meaning. In our culture, he explained, we repeat ourselves because we want to be sure we are understood. We issue multiple warnings because we want to give every chance for peaceful resolution. This is good. This is civilized. But humans see it differently. To them, repetition suggests the speaker is not serious. If you have to say something multiple times, why should it be believed? If you issue 10 warnings, why should the 10th be any more meaningful than the first? So they say everything once and expect to be believed? If you do not believe them, they prove their seriousness through action. Not because they are violent, but because they value the meaning of their words. One student asked, "Is this not just pride? Stubbornness?" HFY considered, "Perhaps. But it is also efficiency? Think about it. How much time do we waste in elaborate negotiations? How many wars start because both sides misunderstand the other's resolve? Humans eliminate that uncertainty. They say exactly what they mean. They do exactly what they say. There is no misunderstanding. No confusion. Only choice." The class ended. The students filed out, thoughtful and troubled. HFY remained, looking at the frozen image of the human Admiral Dot in another part of the galaxy. Aboard a human diplomatic ship, Admiral Chun Rodriguez met with a delegation from the Narration collective. The Narration were peaceful, curious, and deeply afraid. "We want to apologize," their leader said, "for our probes. We did not understand. We thought we had time to respond." Rodriguez nodded. "We know. We have studied your species since the incident. We understand now that you expected multiple warnings. That is your culture. We should have been more clear." "You were clear," the Narration said. "We simply did not believe anyone would act on a first warning. It seemed ... extreme." "To you," Rodriguez agreed. "To us, it seems extreme to ignore a clear warning. But we are learning. Both of us are learning." She pulled up a document. "Humanity is establishing new protocols for dealing with species that expect multiple warnings. When we issue a first contact warning now, we will explicitly state that it is the only warning. We will use multiple languages and formats. We will make it as clear as possible." "And if we still do not believe you?" the Narration asked quietly. Rodriguez met their eyes. "Then you will learn the same way the Concordat learned. We do not want that. We do not want to fight anyone. But we will not tolerate violation of our space or threats to our people. That is not negotiable." "Why?" the Narration asked. "Why such absolute defense? Why not allow more room for error?" Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. "Because we learned. Humans had thousands of wars among ourselves. We learned that hesitation costs lives, that unclear communication costs lives, that giving aggressors time to prepare costs lives. So we changed. We became direct, clear, absolute. It has saved more lives than it has cost. But what of mercy? What of second chances?" "The warning is the second chance," Rodriguez said. "The first chance is not entering our space without permission. The warning is us being merciful, giving you time to leave peacefully. If you ignore the warning, you have used both your chances." The Russian delegation was silent. "I know this is hard to understand," Rodriguez continued. "Your species values patience. Multiple attempts. Endless chances. That is beautiful. But it is not us. We are direct, efficient, final. If you can accept that, we can be friends. Good friends. But if you cannot, then simply stay out of our space. That is all we ask." The meeting ended with an agreement: trade, cultural exchange, mutual respect, but also mutual understanding. The Russian would never again enter human space without permission. And if humans gave them a warning, any warning, they would comply immediately. On Earth, in a small office in Geneva, human anthropologists and linguists worked on a project. They were creating a comprehensive guide for alien species. How to communicate with humans. It covered everything. Human directness. Human impatience with repetition. Human expectation that words have meaning. There was an entire section on warnings. It explained in careful detail that when humans say, "This is your last warning," or "You will not receive another warning," they mean it literally. Not figuratively. Not as an opening negotiating position. Literally. The guide would be distributed freely. Translated into every known language. Made available to every species, every government, every ship that might encounter humanity, because humans wanted to be understood. They did not want to fight. But they would not change their fundamental nature. They said what they meant. They meant what they said. And anyone who wished to deal with them needed to understand that across the galaxy, the message spread. In 1,000 languages, on 1,000,000 worlds, the same story was told. The story of the Concordat fleet that ignored a warning. The story of 14 minutes that changed galactic politics. The story of the species that said things once and meant them completely. Some species were angry. Humans were arrogant, they said, inflexible, dangerous. Some species were thoughtful. Perhaps humans had a point, they said. Perhaps clear communication was better than elaborate games. Some species were cautious. They marked human space on their maps. They instructed their ships to avoid it. They decided that some species were simply too different to deal with, and some species reached out. They sought trade, friendship, alliance, because they understood that humans, for all their directness, were not hostile. They were just clear. And in a galaxy full of elaborate deceptions and complex protocols, clarity had value. 1 year after the incident, the Galactic Assembly passed a resolution.